Zara's refusal had not begun at the entrance. The real confrontation had started minutes earlier, away from the formal order, when Camilla allegedly made one quiet remark about where Zara belonged. It sounded harmless enough, but Anne heard the meaning hidden beneath the polished words immediately. There had been no raised voices, no obvious argument, nothing dramatic enough to stop the preparations around them. That was precisely what made the exchange so uncomfortable. Camilla had referred to the planned entrance order with the polished calm expected inside royal circles, reminding Zara that senior members would move first and that the sequence should remain undisturbed. On the surface, it was protocol. Nothing more. But Zara did not hear a simple instruction. She heard a boundary being drawn. A reminder that whatever closeness existed within the family, rank would decide who moved ahead and who remained behind. Camilla's words remained courteous, almost impossible to challenge without appearing unreasonable. Yet underneath them sat a sharper message. The public image mattered. Seniority mattered. And Zara was expected to understand her place within it. Zara answered without hostility. She did not push back immediately or demand an explanation. Instead, her response became shorter. Quieter, the warmth disappeared. And Anne noticed. That silence mattered, because the dispute was never truly about who crossed a doorway first. Zara had spent much of her life close to the monarchy, without building her identity around ceremonial position. To her, an occasion involving family did not automatically need to become another demonstration of who outranked whom. Yet, she could feel the tone changing. An informal gathering was being pulled into the machinery of royal precedence, where every movement could be interpreted as submission, authority, or distance. Anne watched rather than intervened. She knew how easily palace language could sound colder than intended, and she was not prepared to create a confrontation over one badly chosen phrase. But she also knew something else. Protocol could become power when used often enough. It could quietly communicate who had influence, who was expected to yield, and whose position inside the family was beginning to narrow. Camilla appeared satisfied that the matter had been settled. She moved toward the entrance with the confidence of someone expecting the agreed order to follow behind her. What she did not know was that Zara had already reached a decision. She would not argue. She would not make a scene. But neither would she reinforce a message she believed had crossed from ceremony into something more personal. And in that restrained refusal, Anne recognized something deeply familiar. Zara was protecting a boundary Anne herself had always valued. Loyalty to the crown did not mean surrendering every private relationship to palace symbolism. But Zara's quiet resistance would have remained a family disagreement if the seating plan inside the royal box had not revealed something even more provocative, something that made Anne realize the entrance order was only the beginning. Anne had suspected that Zara's reaction came from more than a single remark. Then she saw the seating arrangement. One place had been shifted, another had been elevated, and suddenly the entire dispute made sense. What looked like routine protocol carried a message nobody had warned Zara about. The change was small enough to escape anyone unfamiliar with the palace's invisible language. Zara's assigned place had been moved farther from the central royal grouping, away from the position she had expected based on earlier discussions. To an outsider, it could have looked like nothing more than practical planning. A chair moved here, another adjusted there. But Anne understood immediately that inside royal life, distance could speak as loudly as words. That was when the earlier exchange with Camilla took on a different meaning. If Zara had followed directly behind the queen and then been guided toward a visibly more distant position, the sequence would have created a message without anyone having to say it openly. Camilla first, Zara behind. Then, Zara moved outward, away from the heart of the royal grouping. It was exactly the kind of choreography that could be defended as protocol while still leaving a powerful impression about status. And Zara had understood that before anyone else realized she had objected. Anne began connecting every detail. Camilla's careful remark, Zara's sudden coldness, the refusal to follow, now the altered seat. Perhaps Zara had not been reacting to one awkward sentence at all. Perhaps she had recognized that she was being quietly directed into a lesser place within her own family without anyone bothering to explain why. For Anne, that cut deeper than simple protocol. Zara occupied a rare position in royal life. She was Elizabeth II's granddaughter, Anne's daughter, unmistakably part of the family, yet she had never depended upon a working royal title to define her identity. That independence had protected her from much of the competition surrounding rank and institutional importance. But now the very freedom that kept her outside official royal structure also left her exposed. When family affection collided with ceremonial hierarchy, Zara had no formal office to shield her place. Camilla noticed Anne studying the arrangement. And in that moment, the mood changed again. The Princess Royal was no longer observing a minor disagreement. She was examining the machinery behind it. Courtiers moved quickly to soften the tension. The seat, they suggested, had been adjusted for practical reasons. Timing, access, positioning, nothing personal. But Anne wanted one answer. Who had authorized the final change? The response was not immediate. That hesitation was more troubling than any explanation could have been, because it slowly became clear that the instruction might not have come directly from Camilla at all. Staff may simply have anticipated what they believed the Queen would prefer, and arranged the family accordingly. That uncertainty changed everything. Because Anne was no longer asking whether Camilla had offended Zara, she was asking who inside the palace had begun reorganizing the family in Camilla's name, and how far that authority now reached. Anne did not need a public confrontation to make the palace nervous. One question was enough. Who had approved the changes? The answer should have been simple. Instead, officials hesitated, explanations shifted, and Anne discovered that nobody wanted responsibility for a new royal order everyone seemed expected to obey. After the event, Anne did not begin by questioning Zara. She already understood why her daughter had reacted. What concerned her now was the machinery behind the moment. Who had changed the seating? Who had decided the entrance sequence? And why had something so apparently routine produced so many different explanations? Senior aides were approached quietly, without accusation. Yet the answers only deepened the mystery. One official mentioned precedence. Another referred to security. Someone else blamed positioning and timing. Then came seniority, followed by the familiar excuse of last-minute adjustments. Each explanation sounded possible. Together, they sounded rehearsed. Anne began to suspect that no single instruction had been given at all. That possibility was more troubling. It suggested an unofficial culture had taken hold, one in which staff anticipated Camilla's position and reorganized details around what they believed the Queen would expect. Camilla may never have asked for Zara to be moved. She may never have demanded the entrance order. But she still benefited from a system increasingly designed to place her authority at the center before she even spoke. That made the conflict harder to confront. Zara wanted no public battle. She made that clear to Anne. She had no interest in headlines, rival camps, or being portrayed as a rebellious royal relative. But she also refused to become part of symbolic gestures that made family members appear subordinate when no genuine ceremonial reason required it. Her objection was not against the crown, It was against turning every family relationship into a hierarchy. Anne understood the danger immediately. If she challenged the arrangement too aggressively, Zara could be painted as difficult. If she remained silent, the pattern might become permanent. And beneath the dispute sat an older, more emotional tension. Anne carried the authority of Elizabeth II's daughter, shaped by decades of service, discipline, and an instinct that duty did not need constant displays of status. Camilla carried a different authority, that of Charles's queen, formal, immediate, and inseparable from the new reign. Anne did not dispute that rank. What she questioned was whether it should automatically reach into every private interaction. Then word spread through the household that the Princess Royal had asked for formal clarification. That changed the atmosphere. Because whatever answer came next would not simply explain one seating plan. It could establish a rule for every future gathering. And that was when the disagreement stopped being about Zara alone, because one seemingly minor question threatened to expose a much larger struggle over how much power a queen's rank should carry once the palace doors close. For Camilla, Anne's challenge touched a wound far older than the royal box. After years of scrutiny, rejection, and questions about whether she truly belonged beside Charles, she had finally reached the highest position available to her. Now another royal woman appeared to be questioning what that position actually meant. From Camilla's perspective, Zara's refusal was not simply an awkward family moment. It carried a deeper risk. Royal authority, after all, depends partly on consistency. The order must appear settled. The rules must look unquestioned. If one relative could quietly reject a position because it felt too formal, then every future appearance could become vulnerable to private interpretation. And once protocol became negotiable, Camilla feared something more dangerous would follow. The suggestion that her own rank was negotiable too. Privately, she insisted she had never intended to humiliate Zara. The changed seating, the entrance order, the carefully managed sequence, none of it, in her view, had been designed as punishment. She regarded the reaction as far larger than the original issue deserved. Yet there was a contradiction Anne could not ignore. Camilla wanted the incident treated as insignificant, while at the same time insisting that the hierarchy Zara resisted must remain visible. That was where the two women truly divided. Camilla believed the present crown required clarity. Rank carried responsibilities, and those responsibilities had to be reflected publicly. Anne saw monarchy differently. To her, authority was strongest when it did not constantly need to announce itself. Family history mattered. Years of service mattered. So did restraint. A queen could hold precedence without turning every private gathering into a demonstration of who stood above whom. Charles now found himself trapped between those two ideas. If he defended Camilla openly, Anne could see it as confirmation that the new reign intended to impose formal hierarchy on every branch of the family. If he softened the arrangement, Camilla could feel that he had allowed one refusal to weaken her position. Either way, he would appear to be choosing between his wife and his sister. Zara, meanwhile, stepped away from the growing dispute. She did not lobby Anne. She did not seek allies. She made it clear that her refusal had been personal, not the opening move in a campaign against Camilla. That only left Anne carrying the larger institutional question. Then came the detail that transformed concern into urgency. Anne learned that another upcoming engagement contained almost the same entrance structure. Once again, Camilla would move first. Once again, Zara would be placed directly behind her. The palace could repeat the arrangement and risk another refusal, or it could change it and silently admit that Zara's decision had forced the crown to reconsider. The next engagement, therefore, became more than another royal appearance. it became a test, because whatever order the palace chose would reveal whether Zara's refusal had changed anything. And everyone knew Charles could no longer remain outside the dispute. Charles had spent his reign balancing family emotion against the demands of the crown. Now the conflict had reached his own household. Support Camilla too visibly, and Anne would see confirmation of everything she feared. Change the arrangement, and the Queen could appear publicly weakened by Zara's refusal. The advice reaching Charles was divided almost immediately. Some inside the palace argued that the original order had to remain untouched. To change it now, they warned, would make the institution look uncertain and suggest that one act of resistance could rewrite established precedents. Others saw the opposite danger. If Zara were placed in exactly the same position again, the next appearance would no longer look accidental. It would look deliberate, almost as though the palace had chosen to force the issue in public. Charles understood both arguments, which made the decision even harder. Camilla's formal position as queen was not open for negotiation. But neither could he ignore Anne's point that ceremonial authority did not need to be imposed in every setting, especially on relatives who held no active working role within the institution. And Charles knew his sister well enough to understand one thing clearly. Anne did not create disputes for sport. If she had pressed this far, she believed something deeper was being tested. Camilla urged consistency. From her perspective, changing the plan now would send a dangerous message inside the household. Staff would assume resistance worked. Other relatives might begin questioning every arrangement they disliked. What had started as one uncomfortable entrance could become a precedent for endless private bargaining. Anne, however, offered no demand that Zara move ahead of Camilla. She proposed something far more difficult to attack. Remove the confrontation entirely. Allow different family groupings to enter separately. Stop forcing a symbolic hierarchy where no constitutional purpose required one. That distinction mattered. Anne was not trying to defeat Camilla. She was trying to prevent the palace from creating a contest that did not need to exist. For Charles, the compromise had an uncomfortable elegance. Camilla's rank would remain untouched. Zara would not be placed directly behind her. No one would publicly win, no one would publicly lose. And perhaps that was precisely why it could work. Then another concern reached him. Younger royals and extended family members had quietly noticed similar changes since the reign began. Access had shifted. Seats had moved. Certain relatives were appearing farther from the center. What had once been informal was becoming increasingly structured. Suddenly, Zara's refusal seemed less isolated. It raised a more dangerous question. Was the monarchy simply becoming more efficient? Or was it slowly narrowing its inner circle without ever saying so openly? Charles finally approved a solution designed to end the confrontation, but when Anne discovered what else had been changed alongside it, she realized the king had not simply rearranged an entrance, he had quietly redrawn the boundaries of the royal family. The palace solution looked almost invisible. Zara would not be required to follow Camilla. Camilla's precedence would not officially change. No apology would be announced. Yet buried inside the revised arrangements was something far more important, a new distinction between royal rank and private family belonging. Charles had found a way to end the immediate confrontation without publicly declaring either side victorious. Future mixed family appearances would be handled with greater care. Formal state occasions would preserve the traditional order without ambiguity, but more personal gatherings would no longer automatically force non-working relatives into rigid ceremonial sequences simply because senior royals were present. On paper, it looked like a technical adjustment. In reality, it was a boundary the palace had resisted defining for years. Camilla's formal position remained untouched. At constitutional events, state ceremonies, and official royal engagements, her precedence would be unmistakable. The palace could therefore insist that nothing had been taken from the queen. Yet Zara had also secured something important. She would not be expected to perform symbolic deference in situations where nobody could clearly explain why that gesture was necessary beyond maintaining an image. Anne understood the significance immediately. Charles had effectively acknowledged that rank had limits. A family member outside official royal service could still belong deeply to the dynasty without being treated as part of the working hierarchy every time the family gathered. Camilla accepted the arrangement, but unease remained beneath the calm. To her, exceptions could become habits, and habits could become challenges. If private settings allowed different rules, where exactly did private family life end and royal representation begin? That line had never been easy to draw. Charles knew the danger. He privately made clear that he would not allow family disagreements to become public loyalty tests. Every entrance, seat, pause, and gesture could be turned into evidence of division. The monarchy could survive disagreement. What it could not afford was the appearance that relatives were repeatedly testing one another in public. And the consequences now stretched far beyond Zara. Peter Phillips, Beatrice, Eugenie, Louise, James, and other members of the extended family could eventually benefit from the same distinction. They belonged to the royal family, but they did not all belong to the institution in the same way. That was when Anne saw the deeper truth. Zara's single refusal had forced Charles to confront a question the new reign had never fully answered. Who belonged emotionally? Who belonged institutionally? And whether those two forms of belonging always needed to be arranged in visible order. But one problem remained untouched. Camilla and Zara had still not spoken directly. The palace had solved the protocol, but it had not repaired the relationship, and when Zara and Camilla finally found themselves facing one another without aides arranging the distance between them, Anne knew the most important conversation was still ahead. When Zara finally spoke, she did not accuse Camilla of stealing power, disrespecting Anne, or rewriting royal history. Her explanation was quieter and far more difficult to dismiss. She said the moment had never been about walking behind a queen. It was about refusing to pretend that rank had replaced family. Zara made one point clear from the beginning. She accepted Camilla's position. She was not challenging the crown, constitutional precedents, or the authority attached to being queen. What troubled her was something far more personal. Situations that once felt like family gatherings were becoming increasingly formal, arranged through invisible lines of status that seemed to follow everyone even when no official duty required them. The earlier remark had unsettled her. The altered seat had confirmed the feeling. Zara told Camilla that she had not felt like a relative arriving among family. She had felt placed, positioned, used to complete a picture in which hierarchy mattered more than relationship. That was the part she could not ignore. Camilla pushed back gently. She insisted there had been no intention to diminish Zara, no desire to make her appear lesser, and no understanding that the arrangements would carry such personal weight. But Zara did not accept intention as the entire answer. If the same message kept appearing through seating, entrances, invitations, and order, then eventually it stopped mattering whether anyone had openly commanded it. The structure itself was speaking. Anne remained mostly silent. For the first time, Zara was saying exactly what Anne had been defending all along. Respect for the crown did not require every private relationship to become ceremonial. A queen could be honored without turning every relative into a symbol of obedience. That was when Camilla was forced to confront the hardest possibility of all. Becoming queen had changed more than her title. It had changed how people around her behaved. Staff anticipated her wishes. Courtiers adjusted arrangements. Family members were organized around her authority, sometimes without her asking for any of it. Charles's compromise survived because neither side completely won. Camilla kept the full authority of her role. Zara kept the independence of hers, and secured something less visible, but perhaps more important, acknowledgement that those two positions did not have to destroy one another. Yet the warning remained. As the monarchy became smaller and more centralized, the line between working royal and family member would only become more sensitive. Every seat could become a message. Every entrance could become a test. Every invitation, jewel, gesture, and absence could be interpreted as evidence of who mattered and who had moved farther away. And that brought everything back to the moment that started it. What looked like Zara simply refusing to follow Camilla was never only about who walked first. It was the instant a hidden struggle between family and hierarchy became impossible to ignore, and Anne saw it before anyone else, because she understood exactly what was being lost.